Hello everyone, welcome back to this second week of the Clown Decade. And I like to keep reminding everyone that we are only at the beginning of the Clown Decade, because I think things are only going to get worse from here. Because we appear to have fully forgotten exactly what traditional values and morals we had in this country, as has been made clear by the saga with Matt Hancock. Now, for those of you who may be outside of the UK and not fully up to date on who Matt Hancock is, here is an average image of him looking a bit of a freak walking down Downing Street. Now, he was the Health Secretary for the United Kingdom during the COVID pandemic. So as Health Minister, it was his job to put forward policy to help combat the pandemic. And on the vaccine front, he did very well, but he is also the person who has put forward all the social distancing rules and gone through with experts exactly how we should deal with the pandemic before the vaccine rolls out and before we can have our freedom again. So the policy from the government was to maintain social distancing, so that means a minimum of 1 metre apart from each other, and it used to be 2 metres apart. And obviously limit seeing people. I believe now we have a rule of 6, so you can see 6 people from any number of households in public and private. And obviously there used to be no restriction on that because there was nowhere to go to anyway. And obviously, as you can see on screen, they advise you limit physical contact with others. That includes shaking hands, hugging, etc., probably including kissing and making love. This also meant many of us couldn't see our elderly grandparents, and unfortunately for some of us, me included, our elderly grandparents died during this pandemic. Old, but at least surrounded by friendly faces in my grandmother's case. So obviously the government was trying to tap into people's care harm intuitions in their old moral brain by saying if you go out and have physical contact, get within 1 metre of someone, etc., etc., you are a bad person because you are not helping stop the virus. It's a fairly simple process to tap into someone's care harm principle because absolutely everyone has an understanding of how to reduce harm, and if they are told you are reducing harm by following these rules, you are a good person, so people are going to do it and be Karens about it. Turns out the UK is absolutely brimming with snitches. However, in doing this, we appear to have forgotten traditional morality. It is new morality that we do not get close to each other. It is traditional morality to have things such as the sanctity of marriage and to not provide false testimony against your neighbour, i.e. don't lie. Those are 2 of the commandments, and pretty basic ones at that. So now I may as well get into the whole Matt Hancock saga. The Sun managed to get some sort of leaked CCTV footage, which I will show you now. As you can see, Matt Hancock is in some sort of private office, checking to see if the coast is clear from the looks of it, and then, well, what happens here?
See, that's the push. She can't get away, he's some sort of animal.
And this kiss, of course, goes on for some time. You get the idea, though. This is the opposite of social distancing. And I mean, sure, they're essential workers and they work together, so you're not always going to keep the 1 metre apart. That's fine. But you can minimise social contact, but here they appear to be trying to maximise their social contact. They appear to be just short of Matt Hancock ripping her clothes off and throwing her onto his desk. And no, I do not apologise for putting that image into your head. So, what was the fallout of this? Well, initially, Matt Hancock wasn't going to resign on the day this came out, but luckily a day after, the Times reported this. Matt Hancock quits over affair with Gina Coladangelo. Yes, I did have to just look that up. Former Health Secretary ended 15-year marriage just hours before affair was exposed, shouting to me that he was probably warned about this. Matt Hancock resigned from the cabinet last night after damaging details of his conduct in the affair with his aide Gina Coladangelo were revealed. The Health Secretary fell on his sword after fellow cabinet minister and MP said his position was untenable, and friends told him it was the only way to save his political career. Hancock told Boris Johnson he was resigning last night after the Metropolitan Police faced fresh demands to launch an investigation into whether he broke the law by kissing and fondling his advisor while the public were banned from hugging their loved ones and seeing their grandmothers before they died. But this is just the start of what I mean. The bad thing he did was kiss and fondle his secretary because it broke social distancing, not because he was cheating on his wife. Now, I might be a bit weird in this regard, and I certainly am in the UK, but I really don't care that he broke social distancing rules. Everyone has been breaking social distancing rules before. No, on the day they came into effect. Because it is not realistic for humans to maintain social distancing by not hugging their loved ones and not shaking hands. It is too ingrained in our heads. Though some people did do the cringe thing with the elbows like Boris Johnson does, most people didn't. And even when the cameras are turned off on Boris Johnson, he's still shaking hands and having physical contact with others. So it's all bullshit. But I suppose I can see the reasoning behind people being extra annoyed at Matt Hancock, given he is the one who puts forward the policies of social distancing and has them enforced. But I still think it is a travesty of the modern world that we care more about that than the fact he cheated on his wife. That should be the main scandal here, but it isn't. Because I'm going to read the only paragraph so far that actually brings up the point that he was in an affair. Both Hancock and Gláeddyv are married and each have 3 children. And then it goes straight into Johnson appointed the former Chancellor, Sajid Javid, 51, as Hancock's replacement. A return to the cabinet after 18 months for a key ally of the Prime Minister's wife, Carrie. This is what I mean. One sentence. That is a paragraph on its own to basically say, oh, by the way, they're both cheating on each other's wife/husband, and they both have 3 kids. Basically, they're breaking up their own family. Like, I care a lot more about that than the fact that he's been fired and the fact that he was breaking social distancing rules. The man is a scumbag because he cheated on his wife, and Gina cheated on her husband. And another point being that we are coming out of any sort of lockdown restrictions after July the 19th. So literally, in 2 to 3 weeks after this video is published, none of this will matter anyway. It won't matter that he broke social distancing. But that's all anyone's talking about, something that's only going to be moral for another 3 or so weeks. I mean, listen to this. In a video statement last night, Hancock admitted his behaviour had undermined the government's power to enforce COVID restrictions. I understand the enormous sacrifices everybody in this country has made, that you have made, and those of us who make these rules have got to stick by them, and that's why I've got to resign. Yeah, not because he's cheated on his wife, not because he's breaking his family apart, no. It's because he broke social distancing rules that no one is going to care about in 3 weeks. Yeah, good one. The Prime Minister's decision to back Hancock on Friday was undermined by a dramatic draining of support from within the Cabinet and the Parliamentary Party. It emerged that Hancock, 42, had told his wife he was leaving her on Thursday evening, immediately after he learnt his affair was about to be exposed. What a piece of shit. He even woke up their youngest child, aged 8, to break the news. Martha Hancock had no idea her husband was cheating on her with his university friend, and had considered their marriage happy and stable. I feel so bad for her, I really do, but I'm leaving the government, not because I'm a scumbag who cheated on his wife, not because the woman I hired I was trying to get off with and fondle and have sex with in my office. None of that, no. It's because people seem to care a lot more about the fact he wasn't 1 metre away from her and not getting off with her than they care about the fact that he has been completely unfaithful to his wife and, from the looks of it, has been completely lying to her for months. Which, by the way, that is another commandment broken. And again, this article makes it sound like it's a bit of gossipy, juicy news, rather than the fact that Matt Hancock is one of the worst people in government at the moment. Details of the separation have enraged party members in his West Suffolk constituency, where insiders predicted Hancock might be deselected as an MP at the next election. But allies said that he and Gláeddyv, 43, had a love match and were planning to set up a home together. A friend of Hancock said he is in love with Gina. It started recently, but it's serious. Yeah, we're talking like 8 weeks here. It's an 8-week relationship and they're already planning to find a home. Like, man, that is love at first sight stuff, if you ask me. Hancock visited the Prime Minister at his Chequers country retreat yesterday afternoon. In his resignation letter he wrote, "The last thing I want is for my private life to distract attention from the single-minded focus that is leading us out of this crisis." Unbelievable. Finally. He admits maybe his private life has some issues with it. But unbelievably, he's not saying, I'm a terrible person or anything like that. He's just saying, oh, I'm sorry that I'm being a distraction from saving us from COVID. Like, honestly, I'm not going to go through any more of this drama. It's making me sick. And if it wasn't bad enough that people were caring more about social distancing than him cheating on his wife, I think one of the worst takes has to be the worst part of GB News, which is obviously Tom Harwood, aka the Prosecco Tory-in-Chief. So he tweeted this out. The UK has one of the highest levels of CCTV in the world. Should concern everyone how apparently easy it has been wielded against someone in a seemingly secure private space without their knowledge. Implications for national security and individual privacy are enormous. That tweet screams to me, I'm sorry I got caught. It almost sounds as if Tom Harwood is saying, oh, we should never have been caught in the first place to make this controversy. And now he's deflecting to, oh, isn't it bad we're in a surveillance state? Well, you know what, Tom Harwood? Yes, I agree. Too much CCTV in a surveillance state is bad. But I'm not going to bring up that fact while I'm having a massive go at Matt Hancock for being a massive cheating liar. Because that is much more morally repugnant than the government having a lot of access to CCTV to have a surveillance state. And if there was any time to bring that up, now was not the time, Mr. Harwood. However, I have to say, when it's come to the moral outrage of what has happened with Matt Hancock and the whole affair around him, the most repugnant I've seen has to come from the Anglican Bishop of Manchester. And it's part of the reason why I can't take Anglicans seriously when they make fun of me for being Catholic. So let's take a look at what he had to say on GB News. So Nigel starts off this segment by asking the bishop this.
Most of the conversation has been about hypocrisy. Is it, I want to ask you on this Sunday morning, is it an issue where we should be having a public debate about the moral dimension, perhaps?
And by the way, I thought I'd ought to bring this up. This is part of the reason I like GB News. This is the only clip where I have seen any sort of mainstream media bring up the fact that he cheated on his wife, and that's a morally repugnant thing. So GB News bring on a bishop to get the religious side of it, or at least the Anglican side of it, because religious leaders should probably be bringing forward traditional morals and exactly what we should be doing in these situations. So this is the Bishop of Manchester's take on this.
I'm actually feeling quite sorry for Mr. Hancock this morning. I mean, a middle-aged man struggling a little bit in his job. He has a fling in the workplace. It's hardly that controversial at that level, is it? And I think perhaps had it simply been, he had not been the health secretary, then maybe the matter should have been left entirely private, something for the families to sort out between themselves.
Yes, he is describing cheating on his wife, completely leaving her to have a life with another woman who is also married, with a family, as quote-unquote a bit of a fling. Nothing but excuses from a religious leader about a man breaking one of the 10 Commandments. In fact, breaking 2 of them because he was lying to his wife as well. This is where we are at in Britain, and especially with Anglicanism. This is why I don't take it seriously. All the Anglican Church seems to be doing is trying to completely degrade itself. Don't get me wrong, the Catholic Church isn't doing a great job in that situation too. Though the Catholic Church is slightly better at protecting the family values than the Anglicans are, at least in this example. But I'm not here to piss off my Anglican audience. I know my Anglican audience do not agree with this man and wish that their leadership was a bit more on the side of traditionalist, and wish that their bishops and archbishops would come out and say Matt Hancock is a terrible person because he cheated on his wife, instead of what the bishop says here.
I think what is of concern is, of course, when somebody who's telling the rest of us how we have to behave during the pandemic then is videoed very blatantly behaving in an extremely different way. And what he's got right and what Mr. Cummins got wrong with the Barnard Castle incident last year is that actually if the rest of us are going to keep the rules, then the people who make the rules have to be seen to be keeping them as well. So I think I'm more worried about the fact he failed to keep the social distancing than I am about the fact that he was a middle-aged bloke having a bit of a fling.
He literally may as well say, I care more about the morals of man than the morals of God. And even atheists in my audience can probably agree that why the hell would you care about a temporary moral of saying you need to keep social distancing than you would about an age-old moral of be faithful to your fucking wife. And husband, of course, because Gina is also a terrible person in this case. They just tempted each other and kept going with it, and now they're going to buy a house together. It's unbelievable scenes. But I think the worst part about this whole clip is that Nigel Farage literally brings a bishop on to say, please tell us why Matt Hancock is a terrible person for cheating on his wife. And instead of doing that, he goes, oh yeah, I don't really care about that. I care about the hypocrisy like everyone else. What is the point of having a church if it is not going to try and keep traditional morals front and centre? What is the point? But one last point on this whole saga is that Tom Harwood's whole thing is absolutely pointless, because it turns out the CCTV camera he was caught on was turned around to actually try and catch him. So according to the Evening Standard, the CCTV camera that ended Matt Hancock's career was deliberately tampered with to stitch up the former Health Secretary, senior Whitehall insiders believe. The camera was originally installed to point towards a glass door and balcony with sweeping views outside his ministerial office, which was considered a security weak point, but somebody turned it around so that it pointed instead to the internal doorway where Matt Hancock was caught kissing and fondling his aide, Gina Coladangelo. An internal investigation is seeking to discover if the camera was moved accidentally during renovations, or whether it was repositioned by the leaker to spy on the couple. Insiders are convinced it was done deliberately. I don't care. I don't care whether it was done deliberately or not. I care about the fact that it is much worse for Matt Hancock to be cheating on his wife than any other point brought up here. And yes, it is the one point that barely anyone is bringing up. And when a literal bishop is brought on GB News and asked, literally given an open goal by Nigel Farage to say, look, just say cheating's bad, he turns it around and says, nah, who cares about cheating? Honestly, who cares if Matt Hancock cheated on his wife? He wasn't social distancing. A fucking bishop said that. I mean, things have got so ridiculous that we've started putting gargoyles of NHS workers on churches. This is what you see now at the Christchurch Priory. They've even got a little NHS thing to the left of it. I think people in the UK need to realise that the NHS is complete garbage, and it is not due to underfunding, though I'm not going to focus on that in this video now, but the NHS isn't going to last forever. It should never, ever be put on as a permanent fixture to any sort of religious building, because it is not a religious institution and has nothing to do with religious institutions. Instead, it has become a sacred cow of itself, and in fact that breaks another commandment. The NHS is literally a false idol. You should only praise God, but for people in the UK, you must have seen this. Things praising the NHS everywhere. On my runs, I must have seen about 20, 30, 50% of the houses, maybe even, at one point, just have rainbows everywhere saying, we love our NHS and stuff like this. It's ridiculous, but seems to have become some sort of religious institution on its own. Probably because all the current religious institutions are doing is saying exactly the same as what the government's saying, and people bloody hate governments. But this is what happens when you allow new morals to take over that of traditional morals. Not that I'm saying that all traditional morals are good. I don't think it was good that we were oppressing gay people, for example. But I do think the core 10 commandments are definitely morals we should all follow, since they are pretty basic things such as don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't lie, etc, etc. But that's basically all I had for you today. So, as usual, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.